So I wanted to address this video made by Phil Scott and the African Diaspora Network channel. I think that's what ADNC stands for. But I've been subscribed to this channel for a long time, and I really like his content. However, he did a video entitled "Black American Hatred," and it featured three young African men in Britain or somewhere in the UK. They have British accents. First of all, they're not even from Africa, like they don't exist currently or reside there. They may originally be from Africa, but they're talking, they have a British accent, so they're probably living in Europe somewhere. And so I don't think it's fair to bring Africans who are currently residing on the continent in this kind of discussion. Because number one, black people, Africans, Jamaicans, anywhere in the Caribbean, black people in the entire diaspora, nobody is monolithic. So that's first and foremost. The views of these three people are the views of these three people. You have to deal with people on an individual basis. But they were in the video, the three men were talking about how black Americans are really, really stupid, and that we bring them forward a few steps forward and then we bring them back a few steps backwards. So he was somebody, I think it was this guy right here, he was comparing Sexy Red. 1 minute black Americans present someone as great as Martin Luther King, and then we have Sexy Red. So he was basically saying that we bring the black race up and then we set them back a few steps backwards. I'm not sure who he's referring to as far as who gets to decide how much forward we as black people move, but I'm guessing that this was a white-centered sentiment. So I'm guessing he means how black people look in the eyes of white people when he said black Americans set black people back and then bring them forward. But anyway, one of the guys was saying that the worst black people are from America and then the best black people are from America. And they mentioned Martin Luther King 1 minute and then they mentioned Sexy Red the next. And they were basically saying that blacks in America do not understand anything else besides what goes on in the United States. Like, they take everything, I guess, that applies to the African diaspora and then maybe compare it to their experiences here in the United States, or just that black Americans are just tone deaf and don't know about anything else except what happened in the United States. So Phil made a few, I guess he was trying to dissect this conversation. And as much as I like Phil Scott, and as much as I like the African Diaspora News Channel, he did make a few points that I don't necessarily agree with. Like, he was basically saying, well, black Americans didn't do anything to African people. We didn't colonize them. We did not rape and pillage, and we didn't steal their minerals and enrich ourselves. We didn't oppress anyone, kill anyone, take over anything. So the hatred that they feel, or the vitriol that they feel, should be directed towards whites who were the colonizers, and not black Americans. Black Americans didn't colonize anybody anywhere. So his point was that their anger is misdirected towards black Americans. And then he also went on to say that we are God's original people, and that all the other black people in the African diaspora are just jealous of us. And I swear that was so cringy. And then I turned to the comments, where I saw people in the comments saying things like, black Americans inspired the South Africans to fight against the apartheid, and that black Americans have some kind of ownership on suffering, and that we are the model for all the other blacks in the world to follow when it comes to suffering, and that our model or our example is what inspired them to fight, so they wouldn't be free if it were not for the example that Black Americans have set and the model that we've set for them to follow. So when you get a chance, go on over to the African Diaspora News Channel and watch this video entitled Black American Hate or Hatred, and you will see for yourself. Look in the comments. I didn't make it up, but there's a lot of arrogance. There's a lot of superiority complexes and a lot of boastfulness coming from African Americans. I'm sorry, it just is. And I'm not justifying their reasons to feel the way that they feel. Like I said, these are just three people with their own views. It has nothing to do with anyone else. But just take a look at the comments, and it does look a little tone deaf. So for one thing, I wanted to break down this concept of people being jealous. Jealousy is an emotion that another human being feels towards another human being when the first human being has something that the other human being wants. African people and people in the Caribbean are all black, just like Black Americans. Black Americans came from Africa. African people have the ability to create rhythmic beats. They have the same gift of, that rhythm and soul and creativity. We look similar. They have the same kind of hair. They have the same kind of strong voices and the strength and resilience, strong sense of pride, the ability to influence music and influence the world through their culture, just like black people everywhere else. So just to say that someone is jealous, that isn't necessarily the truth. The plight of Black Americans was certainly televised and well known, but it was well known just off of the strength of Black Americans being Americans. That's how we were able to influence the world. American culture influenced the world, much like French culture, much like Italian culture, much like a lot of countries that are already developed. The privilege of being in a country that's developed is that your story gets heard, your story gets told, and some of the underdeveloped places do not get told. Their stories don't get told. Their stories are told for them. And the sad part about it is that there's been a lot of other people of other groups that have told the story of Africans for years and years and years. And that's the only story that Black Americans got, was that they live in underdeveloped countries. They don't have wealth. They don't have modern day conveniences. They don't live in houses. They live in huts, and they're over there starving somewhere. And unfortunately, those stereotypes do exist in the minds of a lot of African Americans. Sometimes people, just being human beings, it's easy to think that you are superior to another person. Even when you're not doing it on purpose, you tend to think that you already have it better, or that you live better, or that you know better than the other person, because you live in a developed part of the world and they don't. So that's where that arrogance comes in at, in the comments, where people were saying, well, you guys wouldn't have this if it wasn't for us. And black people constantly talking about Africa as what put them on the map, because we set the model. We are the model for strength and resilience, and you guys just followed us. That is actually the furthest thing from the truth, because if a person is under a system of oppression and they are being oppressed, being brutalized, being unfairly treated in their own land, they're going to have the spirit of fighting, or the spirit of resistance. They're going to give resistance back to that force that is oppressing them. That's a normal human thing. Africans have been doing that since the dawn of time, ever since colonizers ever set foot. Arab colonizers, white colonizers, whoever set foot on their land, they've been doing that from day one. And it may be true that African Americans did not oppress or colonize anyone, but the thing is that African Americans sometimes speak on other people's cultures and beliefs and try to tell other people how to identify based on how it is in the United States. I feel like Black Americans don't really take the time to really try to understand where other people are coming from. Like Tyla, for instance. like she is a mixed woman and she identifies as colored, but that's how it is over in South Africa. That's not how it is over here in the United States. So that is how they categorize people who are mixed versus people who are not mixed. But that's how it is in their country. And black people in America don't seem to want to understand that or try to understand that. It's just, well, you don't identify as black, so you're, the hell with you. And it's just like a very ignorant and tone deaf way to deal with other cultures and other people around the world, because you will have to first understand how things work over in their country. Everything is not set up under American standard, and I think black people sometimes can be a little stubborn when it comes to dealing with people in other countries, African people, the Caribbean people, and that's where the frustration and the breakdown is coming from. Black people in America have certainly been influential throughout the world, but in dance and song and clothing and style and AAVE, that's something that's pretty much social stuff. We have influenced the world in terms of resiliency and resistance when it came to oppression back during the Civil Rights Movement and Jim Crow. But the examples that we're showing now, and basically pointing to the example the guy gave in the video about like Sexyy Red or Cardi B or just the public figures that African Americans tend to uplift, are typically not in line with the African mentality or the African values. So we have in America or in the West in general have embraced this form of degeneracy where our no pride, no shame circumstance is on full display, and it's unapologetic in the West. And that is why we are so vastly different, and there's a breakdown as well. Even though Sexyy Red is like one person, Cardi B is one individual person, there's that kind of mentality is prevalent among black Americans, and that is why Cardi B and Sexyy Red are so popular, so another thing that I saw in the comments that black Americans were boastful about was being God's true original people. And the thing is that with all of the degeneracy and the degenerate behavior, the crass language, the things that we do and embrace over in the West, it's not indicative of God's people. It's not the kind of behavior you would expect from God's people. The segment of black America that should not have a voice, it seems like that segment has the loudest voice. Like every group has another group or part of it that is like a degenerate part, but it seems like the best of black people kind of like get up on TV before the world and embrace street culture. Even when you have Kamala Harris on the BET Awards saying that she's out here in these streets, and you're the vice president, you shouldn't be talking like that. Another thing about black Americans is that sometimes the ones that have a lot of money, not all of them, I mean, I'm not gonna keep saying not all, of course we know that goes without saying, not all, but you do have black people that will go over to different parts of Africa with expensive items, expensive luggage, purses, watches, jewelry, whatever, and then they'll try to flex on other Africans who they feel like don't have the same items or luxuries. And I know they do, because they do that shit over here. They make fun of African people's names, they make fun of their culture, they call them black, blackity, black, 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 and African booty scratchers or whatever. No, making fun of their dark complexions, even though they swear up and down that they're not, and they're like the biggest, colorist freedom fighters over here. They go over to other countries or stay here and do it. Sometimes black Americans, and some of them, I'm not saying all of them, but some black Americans do have arrogance about them, and they feel as if they can flex and look down on people based on however much money they have. So they go over to the continent maybe and flash their money, or they do it here, act rude and condescending and bitchy toward people who are different, and then swear up and down they've done nothing wrong. They don't see anything wrong with that. Some people are like that, and it's making all black Americans look bad. At this point, black Americans just really need to check their attitudes, and they really need to try to adjust it, because we can't keep falling out with everybody all over the world. We done fell out with Africans, Caribbeans, dark and light skinned people don't like each other. You got people who are divided on a socio-economic basis, generational basis. Black Americans in general, and I'm only saying that because I'm a black American. So I'm only saying that because I understand this culture. I can't comment on African culture or Caribbean culture. I'm not from that region of the world. I'm from the United States. So I really do critique my community, which is the African American community. I'm familiar with how African Americans think, how they move, the mentality of African Americans, and I know and the experiences, the history, everything. So that's what I speak on, and I feel like we have become kind of arrogant, and sometimes we are willfully ignorant, and that's what makes people of our own in the African diaspora of our own people not like us. So we really need to adjust that and change.